In his Independence Day speech, Prime Minister Modi had announced his government's plan to scrap the 6-decade-old Planning Commission. And now the Prime Minister wants ideas from you on the formation of this new institution. In a tweet today, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Inviting you to share your ideas on what shape the new institution to replace the Planning Commission can take." The Prime Minister's personal Twitter handle went on to add, and I quote again, "We envision the proposed institution as one that caters to the aspirations of 21st century India and strengthens participation of states." The PM tweeted that suggestions can be posted on a government website, and the tweet said a special open forum has been created on MyGov for suggestions on the new institution. So let the ideas follow. And here's our contribution to Prime Minister Modi's call for ideas on what the Planning Commission should do and what shape and form it should take. We're now joined by Arun Maira, former member of the Planning Commission, and Rajiv Kumar, senior fellow with the Centre for Policy Research. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Mr. Maira, let me start by asking you, because this is an issue which we have discussed with you several times in the past. Now that the Prime Minister has asked for public comments on what shape and form the Planning Commission should take, as a former member of the Planning Commission, what is the single biggest idea that you would like to give him?
Well, actually, Shireen, there are 5 ideas, but they start with the central idea that the Planning Commission should be converted into a small but very powerful catalytic node in a large thinking system, learning system, which will enable the states and the center and other stakeholders in the country to get intelligent ideas and answers to the challenges that they are facing. So rather than being, as it has been all this time, a very large body of supposed experts who tell people what they should do, the states what they should do, and then somehow able to compel them because they have the power of money to give them, to make them do whatever the ideas that the center gives them. However, this body should be valued by the states and by other stakeholders, not because it has the power to give money, allocate money to them, but because they value the guidance and the ability that this body enables them to build, to produce their results. So it's a very different type of catalytic body rather than a command and control budget making body. So that's the central idea. Then there are 4 other ideas.
I'll get you to talk me through the other 4 ideas in just a bit, but I want to pick up on the point that you made, Mr. Maira. So you clearly believe that powers to allocate funds should not rest with the Planning Commission anymore. The proposal, in fact, does seem to suggest that the Finance Ministry should have the final say as far as allocation of funds to states are concerned. So you believe that the Planning Commission should not be vested with those powers at all?
Yes, it should be. It should be, for 2 reasons. One is that when people have the power of giving money, they assume that they are giving the best and most useful advice, because people just have to take the advice they're giving because they're giving the money that goes with it. So there's no incentive to make yourself valued by, your advice valued by those who should be getting the benefit of your guidance and your advice. So this then puts pressure on this body to become really very useful to the states and to the others. In fact, I used to have this thing in the Planning Commission with my colleagues. They would say, well, if you're not giving the money to the states, why would they listen to us? And I said, coming as I do from a consulting background, people would pay me large amounts of money to take my advice because they would value the advice I gave and they would find it useful advice to produce the results that they have to produce in turn. So I think it's good for that reason that this body learn to be valued by the stakeholders, not because it has power over them and money power, but because they value the guidance it gives them. The second is, in a very dynamic world, cash has to be managed well. And so every year, or even between the year, in the year, the Finance Ministry has to make adjustments to how much it can give out to the various people to whom the money has to be given. So actually, the money management is being done in a dynamic world by the Finance Ministry. And so the Planning Commission saying, well, over 5 years, you are going to get this and in these stages, doesn't make sense anymore.
Absolutely. Let me take that point across to Rajiv Kumar. Rajiv Kumar, would you agree with Arun Maira that this business of A, laying out 5-year plans, and then B, the Planning Commission deciding which state gets how much, the time for that is over? You need a much more dynamic, responsive system, and hence the budgetary allocation responsibility should rest with the Finance Ministry.
Shireen, first let me say that I completely agree that the Planning Commission should be scrapped. It's an institution which was designed for a closed economy, for a centrally planned economy, and we now need an institution which is going to serve the country in an open global economy framework. And that's a big shift that it has to make, that India is now an open economy. It's in the globalizing world where you don't have to do cross-sectoral balances and then allocate investment funds to achieve that. The second point that I wish to make is that the business about allocating money to the states should ideally be handed over to the Finance Commission and not necessarily to the Finance Ministry. The Finance Commission can be given additional duties of looking at the developmental needs of these states and then allocate money accordingly. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to the Finance Ministry, and it will be better to do it to the Finance Commission simply because it's a statutory constitutional body and will not be seen as partisan by the states which don't belong to the same, which are not ruled by the same party. The third point that I want to make is that the Planning Commission's one of the central roles was to allocate and decide where should public investment go, government investment go. At a time when it used to be about 70 to 80% of total investment in the country, today it is down to 30%. And in any case, our public sector enterprises have grown up enough to decide, to make their own decisions on how much and where to make those investments, so we don't need a Planning Commission to do that. Having said all of that, what I think the Planning Commission, one, it should be completely renamed, and it should be something like a National Development Reforms Committee or a commission, and the words development and reforms would be the key for that particular body. And my own feeling is that it should be a conduit for fresh ideas from across the world into Indian policy making for achieving a different paradigm of development which emphasizes employment, and employment be the key focus of this new body. And the second one, which is a reform, which would then indicate that this new committee would suggest reform measures to the government which are rooted in Indian realities and are neither ideologically driven, and nor are they so sort of backward that that they don't take the country forward. So a completely different role for the Planning Commission.
A completely different
the new body, which I will.
Yeah, you're saying a completely different role with different functions from what the Planning Commission does today. In that context, with the focus being on development and reforms, and you want it, of course, to be a non-partisan think tank, for the lack of a better word, what would you have to say about the composition? Who should be part of this think tank?
Well, you see, I think it's first most important to really determine its mandate and role, which I've defined. And if you accept that role about development and reforms, then what you need to do is to give it a very mixed composition. We should have people who are, obviously economists, because I'm one, not necessarily so, but also because you should have technologists, you should have scientists, you should have engineers, you should have people who are doing, who are scouting or the latest frontline technologies and looking at solutions, but in a specified number of areas, not all across the waterfront, because then it will lose its focus. And the three areas that I suggest to you, given where India is today, is employment, environment, and education.
Okay.
So these are the three areas where it should focus, and it should get a mix of people who have the domain knowledge and the ability to understand where the world is going and how can that be brought to change the ground realities in India, given that these realities are complex.
I think that is a good idea, that you've specified the three areas that the Planning Commission should focus its energy, or this new think tank should focus its energy on. Rajiv Kumar, if you're not going to put that onto gov.in, we will from India Business Hour side. But Mr. Maira, just taking that point forward, you know, the effort should be to create a non-political body, in a sense, housed with technocrats and specialists who can perhaps give the best ideas. Are we ready for that? Will the government want to give up control in that fashion?
No, I think, Shireen, that this body, the quality of the ideas it produces by listening into other think tanks all over the world and in the country, by listening into what is being learnt by the experience of our states and others in doing things in the country, the quality of the insights it provides and the guidance it gives is what should give it the power. Okay? Now, its political power is also necessary, and that would come by the Prime Minister turning to this body very publicly, repeatedly, and bringing this body's members to its cabinet from time to time to debate subjects with the cabinet, to in the councils of the states, to let this body present its ideas, let the states debate those ideas with the Planning Commission. This has not happened, at least I know in the last 5 years. The Prime Minister barely met the Planning Commission. So, you know, other than the Deputy Chairman. So people would say, well, these people really don't count. Don't count. So if you want some people to count, then you as the Prime Minister must show that you're giving them a lot of time and they have your ear also. So I do hope that at least the Prime Minister will find this body useful as a body that gives him good guidance, and he could bring this body along with the cabinet and say, well, the executive and the strategy group, let's discuss this together. What's the right thing to do and which could be done by us together? So that's how this body would get salience and visibility and power. It need not derive it from its own personal political power.
Good ideas. They're coming in from both Arun Maira and Rajiv Kumar. We hope the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office is listening in on this conversation. If not, we are, of course, going to send your suggestions in on the government website where the Prime Minister's asked for ideas. But Rajiv Kumar, Arun Maira, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour.